All right, we'll just wait 2 more minutes and then we can start. Okay, so I think we can start. When people are going to start joining, I'm also going to accept. So hello, everyone, and thank you so much for being here today for the first lecture of our lecture series, where we aim to explore the harsh realities of life under occupation and give insights into the historical and political context shaping current events in Palestine. A little bit about the lectures. The lectures will happen every 2 weeks, and they will feature in-depth discussions led by scholars, activists, and individuals with first-hand experience on the ground. And we will cover a wide range of topics, such as activism, humanitarian action, legal frameworks, etc. And we are, of course, very much open to your suggestions as well. So please feel free to suggest topics that might interest you. And you can do that via our Instagram account, fip.eu. Yeah, so that's our account on Instagram. We would like to thank the Polish organizations Academia de Palestini, Stefa Wolnosłowa, and Collective Kefia for your helping in promoting today's lecture in Poland. We're also very grateful to our Norwegian friend Anna and the ASJP, which stands for Students for Justice in Palestine, for organizing a public screening of this lecture in Menton, France. And we also extend our heartfelt thank you to those presents from Vozes Judaicas por Libertação in Brazil. We appreciate you very much. Thank you very much for being here. And once again, thank you all for joining. Now we would also like to get to know you a little bit more. We see that there's a lot of people are still joining, and we're very curious to see where you're from. So please type in the chat your name and where in the world are you joining us from? Wow, okay. Greece, Germany, Brazil, France, wow, US, Morocco, Italy, Poland, Brazil, wow, okay. Jordan from England, okay. A lot of different places. Oh, welcome. Switzerland. Nice. So from all around the place. Okay. Yeah, well, thank you again for joining us. And before getting into today's lecture, we want to take a moment to remember the Sabra and Shatila massacre perpetrated by Israel-backed militia in Lebanon 42 years ago. When the massacre happened between September 16 and 18 in 1982. This is a very tragic event perpetrated by Zionist militias, and it's just one of the long series of crimes that this system has perpetrated, with this one being we are commemorating it today after 42 years. Going into today's lecture, Surviving Israeli Oppression, we are excited to introduce our speaker, Baha Hilo, who was born and raised in Bethlehem, Palestine, and is a graduate of Birzeit University with a degree in sociology. He worked with different humanitarian, human rights, and advocacy groups, including the UN, the Joint Advocacy Initiative of the YMCA, and Badil Center for Residency and Refugees' Rights. His work experience also included working with the National Council of the YMCAs in Sri Lanka and the Silver Bay Association in New York. Since 2013, he has been focused on education on Palestine through an initiative called To Be There, where he coordinates different educational visits, including the annual olive harvest, olive planting, Palestinian Land Day, summer study programs, and Christmas in Palestine. As an educator on Palestine, Baha has been working on explaining a so-called complicated reality imposed upon the Palestinians by the State of Israel in an easy-to-understand way. Baha also serves as an activities coordinator at the Citadel in Beit Sahur, Bethlehem, and is the host of our yearly FIP summer internship program in Palestine. With that being said, we're very much looking forward to your questions, which will be at the end of the lecture during the Q&A session. So please save your questions for the Q&A session. And we now give the floor to Baha.
Thank you very much, Amalia, and thank you for having me in the start of this series of lectures. For those who know me or don't know me, I work on education on Palestine, and I always try to help people understand the reality that we go through. It's a very simple reality. If you live within the geography of Palestine and you are born to a Palestinian family, you are subject to Israeli oppression. If you were born to a Jewish family, you are subject to some kind of like Jewish privilege granted to you by the State of Israel. So it's really like a matter of birth that determines how you'll be treated or mistreated by the Israeli oppressor. I'm sure like this might be just a recap for many of the people who like came across my work in a way. And I'm sure like this is for many people, this is not going to be like the first basic introduction that you hear about Palestine from me. I usually like keep things within context, and everything that you see in terms of horrors that Palestinians are forced to survive falls within that context of Israeli oppression. We are commemorating, one of the major horrors that were committed by the State of Israel 43 years ago, but like also we are witnessing like another day of about 347 days of Israeli horrors being committed in the same kind of scale and the same kind of savagery in parts of Palestine, which is the Gaza Strip. So like it seems like Israel's savagery covers so much of our modern history simply because the Israeli government has been in control of Palestine and the remaining Palestinians in Palestine for the past 76 years. And hand in hand with that kind of control, we see different forms of horrors that Israelis come up with. And they have been like very, very creative, not only in committing crimes, but also in dodging those crimes. Like, I remember like all the Israelis who've been involved in the orchestration of and the planning of the Sabra and Shatila massacre and the atrocities committed in Lebanon in 1982. All those criminals have died peacefully in their beds, or they are still alive, um, being able to dodge and escape any form of justice and any form of uh, accountability for the crimes that they have committed. So it seems like getting away with criminal behavior against Palestinians is something that like every single Israeli criminal know. This is why like they are not going uh, to stop. I'm finding it very difficult to um, share my screen with you guys. Wait just a second. All good. Okay. Back to basics. Um, the story in Palestine, like many supporters, defenders, and beneficiaries of Israeli criminal behavior, create this kind of weird story that the troubles in Palestine started like 6,000 years ago, um, with God creating Adam and Eve, and then Adam given or Eve given Adam fruit, and somehow God gave the land of Palestine to the Jewish people. This is an interesting bedtime story, but like Israelis actually base so much of their, let's say, propaganda on stories that are rooted in belief, which are like stories that are very, very difficult to uh, prove scientifically. In a way, like the troubles that we see in Palestine did not start 6,000 years ago, and definitely did not start in heaven. The troubles we face in Palestine started in Europe with the rise of nationalism and nationalistic ideologies in the 19th century that inspired the form of Jewish nationalism that we call today Zionism. Um, and in 1897, like a bunch of those Zionists, about 202 of them met in a town called Basel in Switzerland. And from that point on, they decided that they want to turn Palestine into a Jewish-only space. Everything we have from that meeting in 1897 up until today is the creation of a Jewish-only space in Palestine, as well as the maintenance of a Jewish-only space in Palestine. Those of us who are standing in awe, let's say, before the criminal behavior that we witness in the Gaza Strip and different corners of Palestine, we all need to be reminded that this is not the exception. Like Israeli genocidal behavior is not an exception to the rule. It is the rule. The city that you see pictures of on the screen are pictures of the largest city in Palestine up until the year 1947. Some of the 70,000 Zionist criminals or militants leveled down a city of about 73,000 Palestinians, expelled them, and prevented any of them from coming back to rebuild their homes and their life out of the rubble. You color those pictures, it will look like photos you have taken from Gaza this morning. Um, so like Gaza is today's like largest Palestinian city throughout Palestine, and it's completely leveled in the same way Jaffa was leveled back in December 1947, all the way until May of 1948. So for those people who just think that Israeli criminal and genocidal behavior in Gaza is the exception, uh, that goes in contradiction with the historical events that have been created by this regime throughout Palestine in the past 76 years. When we talk about Palestine, Palestine is a small geography. It's not uh, like it's not that huge of a space, even though like propaganda or politicians or news or literature make you think Palestine is a million miles square, but like Palestine is nothing more than 27,009 square kilometers altogether. Uh, and that is the geography that has been subject to Jewish nationalist and Zionist control. Unofficially since the British took over Palestine back in 1919, and officially since the British handed over Palestine to Jewish nationalists back in May 15 of 1948. Um, what we witness in Palestine, once again, like Israeli criminals are not creative in committing crime. They just see crimes being committed around the world and they try to copy them. The idea of having Europeans come into somewhere on the planet claiming uh, the land and property of indigenous populations is not something new. Those who speak Portuguese in Brazil, they know about that, English in Australia, English in North America, European languages that are spoken outside of Europe, the populations in those geographies know what it means to actually have a bunch of Europeans leaving Europe and claiming somebody else's property and territory as theirs. That process is referred to with the term colonialism. So Palestine, um, sorry, Palestine is subject to colonialism in the same way like other geographies have been subject to on the planet. Um, Whether it's in, uh, sorry, um, whether it's in Palestine or elsewhere, colonialism works on three, uh, like, let's say, three processes um, in order to maintain the domination over a geography and a population. Um, those behaviors have to do with the indigenous population that live in a certain space and with the property and land owned by the indigenous population in that space, and also by recruiting uh, human resources that you know um, that have something in common with you and your goals as a European who wants to settle somebody else's land. In the case of indigenous population, how did like colonizers deal with indigenous populations all over the planet? It was one in three different ways. One way is genocide. And once again, like North America and South America, Australia are clear examples of indigenous population being subject to savagery and genocide of European invaders. Um, the second way is exploitation. India and the south of Africa are the largest examples of exploitation of the indigenous population for the economic benefits of the occupier or the invader. Um, and the third way is ethnic cleansing. Like ethnic cleansing was not used in many places around the world. I can recall parts of Finland, parts of Cyprus, um, uh, the north frontier of India, which had one of the most the bloodiest, one of the bloodiest like experiences of ethnic cleansing known in the 20th century, where nearly 1 million people from the northern frontier of India, whether it's today's Pakistan East or Bangladesh, or Pakistan West or Kashmir. Like nearly 1 million people were murdered in the process of uh, ethnic cleansing that was carried out in the northern frontier of India. In Palestine, what we also have is ethnic cleansing. Like ever since the British took over Palestine to create a Jewish homeland in Palestine, um, there has not been like 1 month that passed without witnessing the removal of a Palestinian individual, a Palestinian family, a Palestinian community, a Palestinian city, you name it. Not 1 month was passed since 1919 up until today without witnessing the removal, the physical removal of a Palestinian individual, community, family, city, and you name it. The percentage of Palestinians or members of Palestinian society that fell victims to the policies of ethnic cleansing, as were carried out by the British and later on by the Israeli government, exceeds 66.7% of the Palestinian population. So we are talking about an indigenous population that have been physically removed and expelled and terrorized out of their homes and property for more than 7 decades now. The form of removal includes terrorization, includes bombing your homes on top of you, includes elimination in the form of like killing you. And also like expelling you outside of the borders and boundaries of Palestine and make sure that you never ever come back home. You see it very obvious today in Gaza with Israeli criminals actually uh, detonating entire neighborhoods. Like, why do they blow up neighborhoods? It's simply to make sure that the Palestinians who are expelled from those neighborhoods will never ever be allowed back. It's the exact same kind of behavior that was carried out by the founders of the State of Israel, who went into the city of Jaffa and many other cities, into villages where they detonated homes of people, blew them up, and made sure that none of the Palestinians who were living in those spaces would ever uh, come back. And if they would come back, then they will be killed or deported or imprisoned. So the process of ethnic cleansing of Palestine is a process that predates Israel control over the geography of Palestine and continues up until today. The second process, if you want to establish Jewish homeland in Palestine, you have to steal people's land. The one thing in common between all Palestinian families we have within Palestine and without any member of Palestinian family on the planet is that we belong to families that were robbed completely or partially of their property and inheritance by the state of Israel. So, like, not one Palestinian uh, family that lives on the planet today did not lose part of their property and inheritance for being stolen by the state of Israel. Of course, Israeli criminals, defenders of the state of Israel, beneficiaries of Israeli criminal behavior, uh, eliminate that process and say God gave them this land. So, like, Israelis believe in a God that makes mistakes. So God gave them my family's property. So they come around to correct God's mistakes by stealing my family's property. And that happens throughout the geography of Palestine. Whenever you hear about terms like confiscation or a reappropriation or declaring land state land or whatever, all those are different words for one term: Israeli land theft. Because Israeli land theft has been going on for more than 7 decades and will keep going on as long as the fate of the Palestinians is put in the hands of Israeli criminals. The third process where the Israelis are not as successful in the third process as they are in the first and second. So like they stole more than 97% of the property of Palestinian families. They expelled more than 66.7% of the entire Palestinian society. But if you want to create a Jewish homeland in Palestine, you need to import Jewish people. Um, um, the majority of Jewish people on the planet do not live here. They live at home, you know? And the state of Israel have been putting so much resources trying to import Jewish people by sponsoring their life for 2 years, by giving them like some privileges on stolen land, like the Israeli government will steal somebody's land, build a house on it, and bribe somebody who's born to a Jewish family outside Palestine to come and live in that house permanently. So there are different forms of bribery that are carried out by the Israeli government and supporters of the Israeli government that lead on importing Jewish people from around the world. Uh, According to a rabbi who made a statement like in 2015, demanding that the state of Israel should have a definition for who is a Jewish person, because the so-called Jewish state up until today does not have a definition for who's Jewish and who's not. So that rabbi wanted like, you know, a definition, like who's Jewish and who's not. Like the state of Israel belongs to a certain group of people, but not another group of people. And he said, based on Israeli practices, like all forms of Israeli bribery and importing of people from around the world to come and live permanently in Palestine, there is about 24 million people that qualify to living in Israel permanently. You know, how many of them live in Palestine or in the, you know, like, because the Zionist name for Palestine is Israel. So how many of those people live here? Around 6 million, which means 1/4 of the population that this, let's say, settler project is built for or created for. 1/4 of that population actually live here permanently. Where do the rest live? The rest live at home. So 75% of so-called Jewish people around the world believe that home is where they live rather than home is where the state of Israel tells them. So if you want to understand anything that is going on in Palestine, like in every single moment of the past 70 plus years, you find like members of Palestinian society being eliminated and removed from their homes. It doesn't matter when you're looking at Palestine, but whenever you're looking at Palestine, you find removal of Palestinians. You find Palestinian families losing their property because the state of Israel steals it. And you find Israeli effort in order to import Jewish people to come and live permanently in Palestine. That has been going on all along before the genocide and will continue after the genocide, have been happening in 1947, 48, 49. Like name the year and you will find that this process has been going on in Palestine throughout our modern history. Now, to make things complicated, the state of Israel have made sure that the only population that is privileged by Israeli criminal behavior is those who are born to Jewish families. What happens to the rest of the population? Because the state of Israel also controls the life of nearly 7 million people. There are 7 million Palestinians. Like this is one thing that you're not allowed to know about. The majority of the people under Israel's control are not actually Jewish. The majority of the people under Israel's control are Palestinian. But like, how can you confuse people about this fact? For Jewish Israelis, Palestine is one unit. They call it Israel. Like the map on your screen is taken from the Israeli Ministry of Agriculture because they view Palestine as Israel. I should have told you also that Israel and Palestine are two different names for the exact same geography. Palestinians call their homeland Palestine. Israelis call Palestinians homeland Israel, you know? But it's not like two different geographies. Like, if you're one of the people who say Israel and Palestine, it's you sound like somebody who's saying like Germany and Deutschland. It makes no sense. It's one geography, one territory. The local name for it is Palestine. The racist name for it is the State of Israel. So for Jewish Israelis who live in Palestine, Palestine is one unit. For Palestinians who live in Palestine, the State of Israel made sure that we live in 4 separate different geographic units. And based on those separate geographic units, the State of Israel invented 4 separate different rules. So in here, it's not like as savage and simple as apartheid in South Africa, where if you're Black, you're subject to the savagery of apartheid South Africa in one way. You know, it doesn't matter which tribe you're from, it doesn't matter which indigenous community you are from, you are Black, you'll be mistreated in that way. The State of Israel have created 4 of those apartheid regimes, not 1, but 4. The first one of them is what Palestinian survivors of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine are forced to survive through. We're talking about a population of nearly 2 million Palestinians that the State of Israel have eliminated their identity. It calls them Israeli Arabs. So they are not Palestinians. They are Arabs who were imported from elsewhere, you know? Like when you call a Palestinian from Nazareth a Palestinian, you connect him to the legacy of Nazareth. You know the biblical story of Nazareth. Like a man and a woman and a donkey left Nazareth 2,000 years ago to give birth to Christ in Bethlehem. That's the legacy and identity of Nazareth. When you call a Palestinian from Nazareth a Palestinian, you connect them with that legacy. When you call them an Arab, you connect them to Saudi Arabia. And it's just a matter of time until you actually work on removing them from Nazareth or from any of their communities. There are about 65 different laws that are still operating in the State of Israel that maintain a primitive status for a Palestinian compared to a Jewish individual. Those 65 different rules and laws cover almost every aspect of your life. One of them is the nation state law, which says that Israel is the land of the Jewish people, which means that you as a Palestinian living at home, you live in somebody else's land. You don't live at home. There's like an interesting way of fooling and deceiving people into believing that everything is all right for Palestinians in Israel or Israeli Arabs, because those people are allowed to vote. Another racist law in the State of Israel is the election law itself, because the Israeli election law says that any party that you're not allowed to participate in Israeli elections if you negate the Zionist Jewish identity of the regime. So as a non-Jewish person and a non-Zionist person, you have to be submissive to Zionist ideology in order to be allowed to participate in Israeli elections. Just like saying in America, like the only way for you to participate in the elections if you are a white Protestant person. That's it. In America, they call that racism. You know, in Israel, they call that the only democracy in the Middle East. The State of Israel cannot be a democracy for one very simple reason. Because like voting activities is not like evidence of democracy. You know, like you can have elections in North Korea. Like they have elections in North Korea. So people can do voting like in different places around the planet. But democracy is something else. The State of Israel cannot be a democracy because the State of Israel is ruled by an ideology. It's not ruled by the will of the people, and definitely not even the will of the Jewish people. The State of Israel is ruled by an ideology, and that ideology is called Jewish nationalism or Zionism. And whoever wants to serve that ideology will benefit from Israeli politics. Whoever stands against that ideology has no room in the Israeli political life. Um, and of course, you know, uh, Zionism is a racist ideology that is rejected by so many Jewish people, but it is like the most powerful sect of Jewish identity and Jewish tradition. Um, but it being the most powerful doesn't mean that it's not racist. So the state of Israel is ruled not by the will of the people. Many people say like Palestinians might have a good chance if Jewish Israelis vote for peace with the Palestinians. That's not going to happen. If even if 100% of Jewish Israelis stand up tomorrow and demand for Palestinians' right to equality and freedom, that's not going to happen because once again, the state of Israel is not ruled by the will of the people. The second set of rules is what we find around Jerusalem. Jewish Israelis who live within the Israeli boundaries of Jerusalem are treated the same way as Jewish Israelis living elsewhere in Palestine. Palestinians in Jerusalem, they are not mistreated the same way as Palestinians in Nazareth. The state of Israel considers Palestinians in Jerusalem, about 400,000 of us, to be permanent residents of Jerusalem. We're stateless, we have no nationality, we are there uh, because Israel found us there in 1967. Um, but one of the many things that Palestinians in Jerusalem have to survive through is denial of access to their places of worship, is home demolition, is denial of access to like building permits. Like Israel approves less than between 1 to 3% of Palestinian requests to build homes on their land in Jerusalem. So if you are one of 100 people who want to apply for a permit, then you will be one of 97 people who are denied uh, access to that permit. It doesn't matter if you are a family, if you are a school who is in need for extra classrooms, you're a community center, you're a hospital, doesn't matter. The same state that builds a house for you as a Jewish Israeli person on land stolen from Palestinians is the same state that denies you as a Palestinian from building anything on your house. If you build it, good for you because they will hand you a demolition order and they will tell you to demolish your house. If you don't demolish your house, then they are willing to demolish it for you and they will make you pay up to 35,000 euros as expenses for the Israeli authorities to demolish your house. So home demolition in Jerusalem is viewed as a state service. You know, you receive that state service only if you are born to a Palestinian family. If you are born to a Jewish family, you receive a different service, which is you will have access to a house. The third set of rules that's more relevant to me personally, because I'm one of nearly 3.3 million Palestinians who live in the so-called West Bank. The term West Bank refers to a geography in Palestine that's about 5,500 square kilometers. That territory was given to Jordan to rule back in 1949 based on a truce that the Kingdom of Jordan signed with the newly founded State of Israel in Palestine. In 1967, the State of Israel occupied that territory. It accumulates up to 18% of the land of Palestine. The entire geography is under Israeli military rule. The only way it will move from Israeli military rule to Israeli civil rule is that if Jewish Israeli civilians are living on that territory. We have about 800,000 Jewish Israelis who live in the territory of the occupied West Bank. They are treated in the same way as Jewish Israeli civilians who live in Nazareth. Palestinians, um, we are subject to an Israeli military rule that is made of 1,665 military orders. If we break any of those military orders at the age of 14, then we will be treated as adults. We will be arrested, sent to an Israeli military court. And in 99.9997% of the case, we will be sentenced and sent to an Israeli prison to do that sentence. If you are a Jewish Israeli person and you break the law, the civil law at the age of 17, you are a minor. If you are a Palestinian and you break the Israeli military rule at the age of 14, you are an adult. So from an Israeli point of view, like Palestinians mature faster than Jewish Israelis. 1/3 of the property of the residents of the West Bank, 1,600 square kilometers of property, is declared closed military zones. The Israeli army uses that land and property on an average of 1 day every 3 months. So the point of declaring your family's land closed military zone is to make sure that you and your family are not allowed freedom of access to that property for every single day of the year, rather than they need it for 4 days a year. More than 48,000 homes, including 1,000 homes that were destroyed by the state of Israel in the past year alone, you know? And I'm not talking about homes that are blown up. I'm not talking about homes that are destroyed by bulldozers. If you were paying attention to the northern part of the West Bank in the past like 3 weeks, Israel have destroyed like hundreds of residential homes through military operations. The homes I'm talking about are homes that are destroyed through administrative means. Like the state of Israel has all of its time to legalize a process of turning you into a homeless person by destroying your house. Like ever since the genocide, of course, like those issues have been like increasing in the occupied West Bank, simply because the world attention is, and rightly so, has to be on the genocide in Gaza. In the occupied West Bank, we have a very weird system, inspired, I think, by, there was a deputy of an Israeli minister of foreign affairs who said like the Israelis should follow the German example in Norway when they ruled over the West Bank. So what the Germans have done in Norway is that they allowed Norwegians to rule over Norwegians under domination of the German occupation. In Palestine, in the occupied West Bank, we have Palestinians who are allowed to rule over Palestinians under domination of the state of Israel. The highest executive of those Palestinians is an 87 years old man called Mahmoud Abbas. He's the president of Palestine, but he too lives under Israeli military rule and is subject to Israeli military orders. But like when you refer in the media that Palestinians have a president, president, state, government, those things like make you think that there is some kind of a geography that Palestinians actually are allowed to rule themselves. Add to that elections and so on. But no, like we live in the occupied West Bank in about 125 separate pockets, and the space between those pockets is controlled by the Israeli army. Today, we have more than 620 functioning military checkpoints that maintain this fragmentation and separation of Palestinians from one another. When you talk about the Palestinian Authority was invented as a first step towards establishing a Palestinian state in the occupied West Bank and Gaza. Like the Israelis and the leaders of the Palestinian Liberation Organization went into a peace process that should have led to the creation of Palestinian state by the year 1999. But there was a misunderstanding. So the state of Israel was willing to give up its civil responsibilities towards the Palestinians in the West Bank, but was not willing to allow Palestinians any form of freedom in the territory because they had to steal the land. They need to steal the land. So more than 60% of the land and property of Palestinians in the occupied West Bank continues to be under the civil and military control of the Israeli government up until today. The fourth system of rules, yeah, this is like how Israeli colonies look like, Israeli infrastructure look like, blah, 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 is what we see in Gaza. Gaza from 5,000 years ago was a city. Like the city of Gaza has been a biblical town for about 5,000 years. Samson the Great was buried there. In 1947, 48, and 49, founders of the State of Israel expelled residents from about 240 Palestinian communities and squeezed them within a small territory of about 350 square kilometers. That territory was ruled by Egypt until 1967, and then Israel completed its control over it in 1967 up until today. Palestinians in Gaza up until the year 2004 were subject to Israeli military rule, more brutal than the one we have in the West Bank, simply because the majority of the population in Gaza are Palestinian refugees. More than 70% of the population in the Gaza Strip are not from there. What does it mean to actually be a Palestinian refugee in Palestine? It means that you belong to a family that was robbed of everything, and at the same time, you are controlled by the regime that have robbed you and your family of everything. You know? So, of course, a Palestinian refugee is a victim of Israel's land theft policies and Israeli criminal behavior, right? So, like in Palestinian refugees communities, you find more rejection of Israeli control, more resistance to Israeli control than you find anywhere else, because you have been robbed of everything. So in the year 2004, the State of Israel decided to change its rule in Gaza from military rule to declaring Gaza to be a hostile entity. The difference is very, very simple. Under military rule, you are a target at the age of 14. A resident of a hostile entity, you are a target from the day you are born or from pre-birth. Israelis call that like we left Gaza, you know, which is something that never happened. No official have ever said that we have left Gaza. All what officials have been talking about is that we are administrating Gaza in a different way. You know, an Israeli advisor of the Israeli prime minister who designed the so-called disengagement plan, he said that the point of the disengagement plan is not to make the Palestinians or the Arabs who live there die of hunger. The point is to put them on a diet. And that was the case from 2005 up until October of 2023, where Palestinians like calories would be calculated, you know. You can go back to reports from 2008 to find out that Israeli officials calculated how many calories required for survival, and that the amount of food that would be allowed into Gaza. 97% of the water resources in the Gaza Strip were contaminated. Palestinians in Gaza would have access to electricity for 4 hours a day in winter, 6 hours a day in the summer. By the year 2023, Palestinians have survived 4 major bombardments and mini genocides, let's say. Yeah, the all along, the status quo in Gaza was just, you know, an open air death camp. That's what the Israelis have created there. I think it was in the year 2017, the UN issued a report claiming that by 2019, Gaza would not be fit for human survival. But seems like the UN does not know anything about survival. Because it doesn't matter what your oppressor does. If you are fit enough to survive, you will survive. Um, Ever since October 7th, the Israelis have carried out a genocidal attack, leveling Gaza down, which are like all the dreams that Israeli politicians have been having for so long. They want to level Gaza down. They want to murder everyone. They want to flatten Gaza. Today, I read that the number of Palestinian school students that were murdered in this genocide exceeds 11,000 people. More than 80% of residential homes were completely leveled. Um, like every atrocity that you can think of, was carried out by Israeli criminals. Beheading children was carried out by Israeli criminals. Uh, Burying people alive. Like the atrocities, like it's impossible it's impossible for me to actually rationalize the level of atrocities that have been committed, but that have been committed by Israeli criminals in Gaza over the past 347 days. It's unbelievable in a way it's impossible to actually start rationalizing this level of genocide. All of this is happening while many people keep going around saying like the problem is Hamas, the problem is Hamas, the problem is Hamas. Hamas is Arabic for the Islamic resistance movement. It's a movement that was established back in 1988. It's a natural outcome of 40 years of Israeli oppression. But here's one thing. What the state of Israel really wants in Palestine is kind of the impossible. The state of Israel wants to continue to oppress Palestinians, subject them to Israeli savagery, and expect Palestinians to be peaceful and submissive in 100% of the case. According to Israeli resources, the members of the military wing of the Islamic resistance movement does not exceed 30,000 people. 30,000 people, that is less than 2% of the entire population of the Gaza Strip. So even if you have 2% of the entire oppressed population who are willing to carry arms against you, that's evidence of that all the Palestinians cannot be reasoned with. All what the Palestinians want is to kill all of the Jewish people on the planet. What the state of Israel really wants is kind of the impossible. They want to continue to oppress you and make sure that you shut up and take it and die in peace or without peace. The four systems that the state of Israel maintains all over Palestine, each one of them maintains the domination of those who are born to Jewish families over those who are born to Palestinian families. That's essentially how the state of Israel commits the crime of apartheid in Palestine. Defenders and supporters and beneficiaries of Israeli criminal behavior come around saying like Israel does not have an apartheid regime. And that's 100% accurate because the state of Israel does not have one apartheid regime. The state of Israel has four separate, different apartheid regimes that operate of every minute, of every hour, of every day on the land of Palestine. The victim and subject of those apartheid regimes are those who are born to Palestinian families. The beneficiary of those apartheid regimes are those who are born to Jewish families. How can they do that? The state of Israel is in control of 100% of the land of Palestine. So they can separate the geography into four separate categories, preventing Palestinians from moving towards one another. Like you prevent Palestinians in the West Bank from having access to Palestinians in Jerusalem, vice versa. You prevent Palestinians from Jerusalem from having access to Palestinians in Gaza, vice versa, and so on. And the second thing is that the state of Israel controls birth registrations. So if you are born to a Palestinian family uh, in the West Bank, then you will be registered as a Palestinian who's subject to Israeli military rule. Same thing in Jerusalem, same thing in Gaza, same thing in Nazareth and other Palestinian cities. So the day you are born, the state of Israel decides which one of those four systems you will be subject to, you will live under, and you will die under. If you do anything to challenge any of those regimes, you will be arrested or you'll be killed or you will be made an example of. You know, you are not allowed to challenge any of those four systems. If you challenge any of them, you will be punished. Um, and the rest is a waste of time. Sorry, it's getting louder. But yeah, so I will stop here and
Yeah, thank you very much, Baha, for this very insightful and powerful presentation, and for shedding light on the uh, daily realities faced by Palestinians um, under the
mhm.
brutal oppression of the occupation. Um, Now, we would like to open the floor for the Q&A session. So please feel free to share your questions either by raising your hand or by typing your question in the chat so that Baha can give you the answers.
I don't have short answers.
We like long answers. All right. Yes, Isadora, here you go.
Oh, do you hear me? Yeah, good. So I will start to help to give some time for people to formulate their questions. I'm sure it's a lot and they're still thinking. For those of you who don't know, this lecture is organized by FIP, right? And we just came back from Palestine a month ago. We were there with Baha and others who hosted us. And well, at least that's something that I experienced when I came back. And well, when I was preparing to go, I was thinking like, does it help if I go? Is there any concrete help that I can offer by going? And I was wondering, Baha, if you can talk a little bit about how you feel about what you and other people have talked about protective how do we call it? Protective international
Presence.
presence. Yeah, international presence. How does it work? What are your impressions under it? What is the importance of going to Palestine in such times like this? And thank you so much for sharing everything with us again.
Um, Palestine is one of those places on the planet that you have to be there to understand it because there is so much uh, knowledge that is produced that actually prevent you from understanding the reality the way it is. One of those things being like the base that Israel and Palestine are two separate geographies. One of it is like this claim that there is a war between Palestinians and Israelis or between Palestine and Israel. There is a peace process between Palestinians and Israelis, and any of that uh, information that is out there is dominating the like the scene when it comes to Israel Palestine. So like people who are outside are already like confused about the reality. For them to explore through that confusion and realize that confusion, they have to actually uh, uh, be in Palestine in a way. Um, how does it work? Like one of the best ways I can explain it is that you know, if you think of a prison uh, metaphor, um, a prisoner is a prisoner. He was born in prison, he will die in prison, you know? If you don't have the tools to break through the prison to release them, uh, you can either ignore them completely and let them die in peace or visit, you know? And the visit works both ways for your well-being and for increasing the hope of the prisoner that one day they will be free. So it's important for people to visit Palestine in order to understand what is happening and also for themselves to get educated and realize what's happening. Um, and what comes out of this process is always in the hands of the outsiders. Like you can take your experience in Palestine and go home and sleep on it, or you can take it home and you know, do something about it by encouraging others to follow your footsteps or by trying to explain to others what you have survived and witnessed when you were among Palestinians. So it's important for your knowledge, it's important for your understanding, it's important for your code of ethics, because like Palestine holds a mirror to you. If you believe in equality, then you go that way. If you believe in supremacy, you go that way. Um, I do not see any negative outcomes on you as an individual to come to Palestine. It's all like positive. If you are racist, you'll hate it. But you know, I have not dealt with many of those racist scumbags in the course of my work. Um, there's you know, what can those of us do outside? Safa. And there is another question. Is there any hope for a solution? Corrado, yes, of course. You know, but first you need to understand the problem in order to know what the problem is. If you think the problem is that Palestinians do not know how to coexist with Israeli oppressors, then many people have tried to throw cash on Palestinians to get them to survive Israeli savagery and Israeli apartheid and Israeli criminal behavior. And that was just like a waste of resources. The problem with any form of oppression is oppression itself. It's not how the subjects of oppression are behaving. The problem with slavery was not that slaves were a little bit angry or were a bit unhappy or were a bit hungry or did not have schools or did not or masters blew up their schools and universities and hospitals and so on. No, the problem was slavery, you know? So you solve slavery. The problem is not that I'm a good or a bad submissive or not submissive subject to Israeli apartheid and Israeli criminal behavior and Israeli genocide. The problem is Israeli criminal behavior, you know? That has to come to an end. Now, defenders and supporters and beneficiaries of Israeli criminal behavior have always promoted this stupid idea that if Israel stops being criminal towards Palestinians, Jewish people will die. You know? So, like, if we fulfill justice in Palestine, if we fulfill the rights of the Palestinian people, their right to freedom and equality, you know, if those rights are fulfilled, Jewish people will die. You know, that's what defenders, supporters, and beneficiaries of Israeli criminal behavior have always repeated over and over again. but like I do not know of that kind of like weird disease that Israelis and their supporters talk about. I know that the consequences of justice, the consequences of freedom, the consequences of equality uh, are positive on everyone except for criminals. People who fear Palestinians' right to freedom and equality, you know, they do that because they, care much more for criminals than they care actually for the fact that everyone is born free and equal, and the state of Israel makes sure that this birthright is not going to be fulfilled for Palestinians. So there is hope for a solution, but that solution has to be a solution where Palestinian right to freedom, Palestinian right to equality, Palestinian right to reparations, Palestinian right to return, all of those rights have to be recognized, and Palestinians need to be supported in getting those rights fulfilled. Um, Now that's the solution. Are we going to go there? I don't know how long it will take us until we come to that solution, but I know why we are not getting there any faster. We live in a world where governments around the world, including your government or any government that has diplomatic relations with the state of Israel, those governments actually provide support for Israeli criminal behavior. Uh, Despite, in terms of economic support, political support, and military support. Those are the same countries that sometimes recognize Palestinians' right to have a decent life, right? Or sometimes provide Palestinians like, it was very, very clear, like the United States is an example of that, like barbaric kind of behavior. The United States provide the state of Israel with bombs to be thrown at Palestinians to murder them and displace them. And they were involved in throwing aid supplies on Palestinians. So what do? You support the criminal to continue committing their crime, and you support the victim of your crime. So when you support two sides of the same crime, you are supporting the maintenance of that criminal behavior. When you support two sides of the exact same problem, you are supporting the continuity of that problem. You're not supporting any kind of resolution. So there is hope for a solution. There is a solution, but every single government that has diplomatic relations with the state of Israel is preventing that solution from being fulfilled. It doesn't matter if it's a country that is ruled by an asshole like Joe Biden, or a country that is ruled by a socialist like what's his name? Uh, Lula, Lula in Brazil. It doesn't matter who rules those governments. Every single government that has diplomatic, economic, and military relations with the state of Israel is a government that is preventing that solution from being fulfilled. But there's a solution and there's hope for it. Lula Zanaro.
Thank you very much. And now Safa is asking, what can those of us on the outside do to help? Do you feel like certain actions feel most effective or helpful?
Okay. What? Okay, there are two things. There's like what needs to be done, and that's not in our hand, because like if it's in our hand, we would have done it long time ago. And the other thing is what can I as an individual do, and what can we as a collective do. So I believe that every person who can put 5 minutes of their time for Palestine, for education, for printing things, for talking to others, for joining a protest, like how are you going to express your rejection to Israeli criminal behavior towards Palestine and the Palestinians, that's in your hands, you know? If you're a doctor, you reject it in that way. If you're a teacher, you reject it in that way. If you're, you know, a filmmaker, you reject it in this way. But it depends on the set of skills that you already have. It depends on the talents that you already have, you know? Because oppression in Palestine touches almost every member of Palestinian society, and I'm sure, like you, and you will have a Palestinian that shares same interest with you or share skills with you. But what needs to happen in terms of oppression is that you reject it. In our indigenous wisdom, there's something I repeat all the time because it's very wise. Like when you see wrongdoings, when you see oppression, you're ought to reject it with your fist. But if you can't, then with your word. And if you can't, then with your heart. And that's the least you can do if you reject oppression. If you are not okay with oppression, you reject oppression with your heart, you know? So what is it you can do with your hand? What is it you can do with your word? What is it you can do with your heart? It's all up to you. But rejection of injustice, rejection of Israeli savagery, rejection of Israeli oppression, rejection of Israeli apartheid, rejection of Israeli criminal behavior is one thing that you owe for Palestine, not for yourself first and then for Palestine. So how you express your rejection of Israeli criminal behavior, that's in your hand. I'm a person who believes that in our rejection of Israeli criminal behavior as Palestinians, we express our rejection of Israeli criminal behavior at an Israeli address. That Israeli address can be an Israeli vehicle, an Israeli checkpoint, an Israeli wall, Israeli oppression is all over us, you know? So you express your rejection in the face of an Israeli address. Now, what's the closest Israeli address to you? You know, the closest Israeli address to you is the Israeli embassy. You know, whatever work we do individually and collectively has to target that space. I've been looking at a human effort around the world for the past 11 months, like millions and millions of people, you know, have taken to the street to express their rejection to Israeli criminal behavior in Palestine. And many of those people like have felt delusional because the genocide is going on, you know? In order to stop this genocide, you need to target the Israeli address in your town. Like imagine if just millions and millions of people protest outside the Israeli embassy until that embassy is shut down and that ambassador is expelled. You know, we would have got somewhere, but like the best time to shut down an Israeli embassy was yesterday. The second best time is tomorrow, you know? And in the end of the day, it's inevitable. It has to happen, you know? But how to mobilize human resources in this way, how to get people just to open their eyes and see the Israeli address as the Israeli address. By the way, Israelis and assholes in general, they love to see people fighting each other. Like police officer from one country fighting with a resident of they just love that, you know? Example on this, a few years ago, there was a referendum in Catalonia. Israelis like supported the referendum and they supported the Spanish government with like weapons to crush the Catalans. They just love seeing people fighting each other. So instead of like being in the street to fight with your police officer, just make sure that your fight is with the Israeli address, not with your fellow people, even if they were racist. Like, you know, I'm not being oppressed by a white supremacist from the United States. I'm being oppressed by a fascist who's in control of Palestine. Let's just be reminded of those things. So what we can do is whatever skills we have, whatever talents we're born with, like use that in expressing our rejection of Israeli savagery and criminal behavior. The problem is that Israelis use the situation and try to play the victim in Italy. That's not the problem. They do what they have to do, you know? As beneficiaries of Israeli criminal behavior, they have to play the victim. Like white supremacists in the south of Africa were the victims of black savagery, right? you know, white supremacists throughout the United States were scared of the Black Panthers. Beneficiaries of racist behavior will continue to, blame the subjects for the problem. It's called blame the victim. I'm sure like it exists in every society, but in a different way. So they do what they have to do. You either allow them to confuse you or you tell them to shut the fuck up. Like there's no room. Like I do not understand why your time is so cheap and useless that you're willing to waste it on arguing with like a racist scumbag or a defender or a beneficiary or a supporter of Israeli criminal behavior. Let them do what they have to do. If they succeed in confusing you, then make sure they don't succeed next time. But yeah. Also, like, do remember, like, one of the side effects of freedom is that also racist assholes benefit from freedom, So that's the side. Like, you should not complain about freedom. I've been in Palestine a few times. Me too. Worse and murdered in Duma. Yeah. 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 The state of Israel colonizes every corner of Palestine, and building colonies and settlements in Gaza is definitely part of this government's agenda. In the year 2004, the Israeli prime minister, who designed the disengagement plan and the removal of 6,000 Israeli settlers from Gaza, did that with the objection of his Israeli minister of finance. So the Israeli government approved the disengagement plan and the removal of 6,000 Israeli settlers from Gaza, and his minister of finance was against that plan. His minister of finance is called Benjamin Netanyahu. So this fascist is like seeing an opportunity of recolonization of the entire, like of within Gaza, and do what he wanted to do back in the year 2004, 2005. You have the difference in Israeli political spectrum is that should we murder all the Palestinians or should we murder a few of them? Should we colonize all of Palestine or should we colonize parts of Palestine? Like in Ruth, there's no no conflict between left-wing and right-wing Israelis on the fact that the problem Israel has is the very existence of the Palestinian people. The problems they have is on how to resolve that problem. When you recognize the existence of a certain group of people to be a problem, then there's no law you cannot hit in solving that problem. Like in Italy, they were talking about, refugees problem, right? So now it's illegal to help drowning people. So like in a way, when you recognize the very existence of human beings to be problematic, there's no law you cannot hit in resolving that issue or resolving the existence of people. The way Israelis resolve us is through elimination or containment, and both ways are savage and racist and, and criminal. But that's from the point of view of the victims, not from the point of view of the perpetrators of those crimes and the beneficiaries and supporters of those crimes. The problem is that the Israelis, no. Oh. Do we have any other questions?
There are two more questions in the chat. One of them is asked by Tom. What are your thoughts on the two-state solution?
Tom. The two-state solution is a very, 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 very old recipe for maintaining the problem. The two-state solution was actually invented before the problem was created. It's called the very first proposal for a two-state solution in Palestine is a document called the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration suggests the creation of two states in Palestine, one for the indigenous Arabs, not even the Palestinians, and one for imported Jews. The partition plan of Palestine was also another two-state solution. People know, or those who are in control of the politics and those who are involved in protecting and defending Israeli criminal behavior, they know that if we just throw this scenario out in public, people will be given the illusion that there is a solution. Once again, the two-state solution is not like the reason we keep hearing it and the reason we keep being attracted to it is precisely because it provides zero solution for the problems in Palestine. The problem in Palestine is Israeli criminal behavior and the Israeli apartheid. A two-state solution is a kind of solution that gets you to coexist with apartheid, the solution for apartheid is end of apartheid. The solution for apartheid is not two states. The current Israeli prime minister actually believes in the two-state solution. He believes that the state for the Palestinians is called Jordan, and the Palestinians should be sent to it. He himself said also in 2012, he did not invent Israeli racism. He just honors Israeli racism, just like it was carried out by the founders in 1948. He said in the West Bank, no, the Israeli reference to the West Bank is Judea and Samaria. So a few years back, he said that in Judea and Samaria, we have a problem. And the problem is that there are 2 million Arabs who live there. So Israel's problem is, once again, that there are 2 million Palestinians living in the occupied West Bank. He said that I have no intention of removing them because it's impractical and inappropriate. But now we see that even genocide is practical, even genocide is appropriate, because it's practical. He said, I don't want a binational state, and I don't want them either as citizens or subjects. So he wants the elimination of the Palestinian people, just pretend that we don't exist. And if one of us comes out to protest, you'll shoot them in the face. So that's the two-state solution that we have right now. That's the two-state solution that Western governments and idiots who know nothing about what Palestinians survived through are talking about. There are Palestinians who are delusional to believe in this kind of two-state solution. There are Palestinians who are delusional enough to think that the state of Israel would accept their humanity, let alone their ability to rule themselves. There are, I told you, we have an 87 years old man who believes he's the president of Palestine. You know, ask him to point out Palestine, he will not know how to point out Palestine. But once again, the two-state solution have done its job, and its job is to maintain Israeli criminal behavior for as long as it takes. And it's going on. What's the reality? The reality is a one-state solution. That's the reality. That's what's happening right now, and that's the solution for the state of Israel. We have one state where if you are born to a Jewish family, you are superior by law. If you are born to a Palestinian family, you are inferior by law, you know? And that's the one state that we have right now. So also, like, don't forget that the issue is not a number of states, you know? The issue is like whether your rights are granted and protected within that state, or they are violated and destroyed within that state. That what matters more than, you know, the number of states that we should have in Palestine. Key misconceptions or biases you notice in international media coverage of Palestine, all of it. The impression that Palestinians are fighting with Jews, the idea that Palestinians have an army and they're fighting the state of Israel, the misrepresentation that is going on. Like, in the end of the day, propaganda is something that the Israelis have perfected for the past 76 years. They have a good network with every media outlet that is considered to be mainstream, and they do their job by confusing their public and misleading them and misguide them. And it happens all over the, it's not like the BBC is different in reporting Palestine than Fox News. Same crap. And it's not that mainstream English-speaking mainstream media is less crappy than French-speaking mainstream media. But it's literally like everything, you know? The failure to recognize Palestinians as survivors of Israeli savage behavior and survivors of Israeli criminal behavior and survivors of Israeli apartheid, the failure to recognize that will lead to alternative narratives, will lead to confusing narratives, will lead to biases and preventing people from understanding the reality the way it happens, and get them to create this alternative reality where, you know, only if Palestinians behave better, you know, but it's almost everything.
Yes.
Misconceptions.
And I think that that was the last question. And I think with this question, the lecture is also coming to an end. And as Lisetta put it, thank you, Baha. Your words are indeed so meaningful and accurate and always great food for thought. Thank you very much for responding to the questions and for your insights. We deeply appreciate you and your work and helping us understand all these issues. And thank you for being such a dear friend of FIP as well. And before we wrap up, I'd like to remind you that our next lecture will take place in 2 weeks, and we will keep you updated via email and then our social media. And again, if you have any suggestions for any topic or speakers, don't hesitate to reach out on Instagram at fip.eu. We can also write that in the chat. Again, we'd like to express our gratitude to Academia de Palestini, to Strefa Vonusova and Collective Kefia from Poland, for the SJP in France, and the Vozes Judaicas por Libertação in Brazil. And thank you for each of you being here today. Thank you for your presence and your engagement. And this is how we keep the series meaningful and impactful. It's very important that together we educate ourselves and other on such important issues. In the chat, we are also going to add the link that you can donate to FIP Europe, since FIP is a non-profit, non-governmental organization that acts as an educational network and funds its projects through fundraising from its members. We truly appreciate your contribution if you have the possibility to donate via the link. We're also going to send a follow-up email with the link, but it's in the chat. And with that being said, we look forward to seeing you at our next lecture and next lectures, and give us a follow so you keep updated with all our initiatives. Thank you, Baha, once again. Thank you all, and of course, Free Palestine.